Milarepa, the Tibetan Yogi, Part 1. The Introduction and Influence of Milarepa. High in the mountains of Tibet, where the wind howls across frozen peaks and silence carries the echoes of meditation, there lived a man who transformed his life from darkness to enlightenment, Jetsun Milarepa, one of Tibet's most beloved and influential spiritual figures. Milarepa's story is not just a tale of ancient mysticism, it's a story of transformation, redemption, and the limitless power of the human spirit. He began his life in tragedy and anger, walking the path of revenge and black magic, but ended as one of the greatest yogis in history, attaining enlightenment in a single lifetime. Who was Milarepa? Milarepa was born in the 11th century in western Tibet. His childhood was marked by betrayal. After his father died, his uncle and aunt took all his family's wealth, leaving his mother and sister destitute. Fueled by bitterness, Milarepa's mother urged him to study sorcery to take revenge. And he did, unleashing storms and destruction upon those who wronged his family. But the guilt from his actions haunted him. Milarepa realized that worldly revenge only deepened his suffering. So, he set out on a journey to find a true teacher, someone who could guide him beyond karma, beyond pain. The turning point. He eventually found Marpa, the turning point. He eventually found Marpa the translator, a wise and demanding master who had brought many Buddhist teachings from India to Tibet. Marpa didn't immediately teach Milarepa. Instead, he tested him through years of backbreaking labor and emotional hardship, forcing him to build and destroy stone towers again and again. Through this, Milarepa burned away his pride, guilt, and attachment. Finally, he received the teachings of the Kabyu lineage, focusing on deep meditation and realization of the mind's true nature. Why Milarepa still matters. Milarepa's story has inspired millions, from monks in Himalayan caves to modern seekers around the world. He showed that no one is beyond redemption, no matter how dark their past. Through devotion, discipline, and meditation, even the deepest suffering can become the path to awakening. Milarepa became famous not for wealth or power, but for his songs of realization, spontaneous poems about truth, impermanence, and freedom, sung in the solitude of his mountain hermitages. His life stands as a reminder. The mind that grasps at self is the root of all suffering. When one realizes this mind, one finds the nature of all Buddhas. Next in the series, Part 2, The Dark Beginnings, Milarepa's Descent into Magic and Revenge. Part 2, The Dark Beginnings and the World He Was Born Into. To understand Milarepa's transformation, we must first step back into 11th century Tibet, a land of rugged beauty and quiet turmoil. Snow-capped peaks pierced the sky, vast plains stretched under thin blue air, and monasteries clung to cliffs like nests of faith. But beneath the stillness, Tibet was changing. Tibet in the 11th century, a time between kingdoms. This was a fragmented era, long after the fall of Tibet's great empire. Centuries earlier, Tibet had been united under the mighty kings of the Yalong dynasty, who brought Buddhism from India and China. But by Milarepa's time, that unity was gone. The empire had splintered, and local warlords and clan leaders ruled small territories like feudal lords, often clashing for land and power. Religion, too, was divided. Buddhism had suffered after the empire's collapse, giving rise to a dark period called the Era of Fragmentation. Ancient Bon traditions, Tibet's indigenous shamanic faith, mixed and competed with new Buddhist teachings brought from India. It was a time of spiritual confusion and revival, when magic, ritual, and genuine insight all intertwined. In this world, people believed deeply in unseen forces. The mountains were alive with spirits. Curses and blessings were part of daily life. And this belief in the power of the mind to heal, to destroy, to transcend shaped the world Milarepa was born into. Milarepa's early life, born into shadow. Milarepa was born in the region of Ganfang, in western Tibet, a place of wind-carved cliffs and barley fields, where survival itself was a daily challenge. His family was once well-off, respected in their community. But when his father died, his inheritance was stolen by his uncle and aunt, who treated Milarepa, his mother and sister, as servants. This betrayal lit the fire of vengeance in his mother's heart. She raised Milarepa not with lullabies, but with anger. When he grew older, she sent him away to learn sorcery, urging him to use his powers to punish those who had wronged them. And so began Milarepa's descent into darkness. He studied under a master of black magic, learning to summon storms and harness the raw energy of mind and nature. One day, when his relatives gathered for a wedding, Milarepa called forth a storm so fierce that their house collapsed, killing many. The revenge was complete, but the joy was fleeting, the weight of karma. As the smoke cleared, guilt consumed him. Milarepa saw that revenge had not freed him, it had chained him to deeper suffering. The spiritual laws of cause and effect, karma, began to unfold in his mind. He knew that unless he would say, he knew that unless he changed his path completely, he would never escape the pain he had created. And so, in a land torn between kings and monks, spirits and scholars, Milarepa began his journey toward redemption, seeking a true teacher who could show him the path beyond sin and sorrow. That teacher would be Mapa the translator, and their meeting would change the course of Tibetan Buddhism forever. Milarepa, the Tibetan yogi, Part 3, The Sorcerer, the Storm, and the Search for Redemption. After his family's ruin, Topaga, the boy who would become Milarepa, wandered the harsh highlands of western Tibet with grief burning in his heart. His mother, consumed by rage and humiliation, pressed him to study sorcery. "If you do not avenge us," she said, "you are no son of mine." And so, burdened by her command and his own anger, Milarepa left home to seek power. The sorcerer Yongten Repa. In a remote valley, he found Yongten Repa, a teacher known for his mastery of dark magic. Yongten Repa was no ordinary man. He lived apart from society, performing rituals that drew on the forces of nature and unseen spirits. To the simple villagers, he was both feared and respected, one who could summon storms, heal, or destroy, depending on intent. Under this master, Milarepa trained in tantric sorcery, which in those days mixed Buddhist mantras with ancient Bon magical practices. He learned to gather energy through deep visualization, channeling the elements, wind, thunder, and earth, through the power of his mind. It was said that his focus became so sharp that the boundary between thought and will began to dissolve. The ritual of the Black Storm. When he completed his training, Yonten Repa warned him, "Power can destroy its wielder as easily as its target. The path of revenge leads only to deeper suffering." But Milarepa's anger drowned the warning. He returned to his village, where his aunt and uncle were celebrating a family wedding in the house that had once belonged to his father. There, hidden in the nearby hills, Milarepa prepared his ritual. He built a small shrine from stones and barley flour, drew mystical diagrams, with black ink and chanted the invocations his master had taught him. He visualized the mountain spirits as dark clouds, calling them to obey his will. Then, as thunder rolled and the air turned cold, a violent storm broke over the village, rain and hail tearing through the valley, lightning striking the roof of his enemy's house. When the storm ended, the home had collapsed. 35 people were dead. The vengeance was complete. But in that moment of triumph, Milarepa felt no peace, only a hollow ache. He had obeyed his mother, but in doing so, he had destroyed his own soul. The path of guilt. After the destruction, Milarepa returned to Yontenrepa, trembling with regret. The old sorcerer looked at him silently, then said, "You have learned to master the outer elements, but not your own mind. If you seek true freedom, you must find a teacher who can lead you beyond karma and delusion." Yunten Repa then directed him toward a great Lama named Marpa the Translator, a man renowned across Tibet for his spiritual realization and his knowledge of the teachings from India. Marpa was said to have trained under the Indian Mahasiddhas, Naropa and Maitrapa, and to have returned to Tibet carrying the heart of the Kagyu lineage, a path of meditation that pointed directly to the nature of mind itself. The turning of the tide, Milarepa set out at once, wandering through valleys and mountains to find Marpa. He carried no wealth, no offerings, only the weight of his sins. When he finally stood before the master, Marpa looked at him with eyes that pierced straight through his soul. Milarepa bowed and said, "I am a great sinner. I have destroyed lives through magic. Please teach me how to purify myself and attain enlightenment in this very life." Marpa did not answer with comfort. Instead, he would test Milarepa in ways that would break him and then rebuild him into one of the greatest saints Tibet has ever known. Part 4. The Trials of Stone and Sweat. When Milarepa finally reached Marpa the Translator, he believed he had found salvation. The great Lama was known throughout Tibet, not as a gentle monk, but as a farmer, a translator, and a realized yogi who had journeyed to India to receive the highest teachings from the masters Naropa and Maitrapa. But the Marpa Milarepa met was not what he expected. Marpa lived a simple life in the fields of southern Tibet, plowing his own land and drinking barley beer. He appeared rough, even ordinary, yet his eyes held a depth that seemed to see through lifetimes. When Milarepa bowed before him and begged for the teachings, Marpa merely laughed. "Teachings? You think you can wash away murder with a few mantras? First, build me a house, a tall stone tower, then we will speak." The first tower. Milarepa obeyed without question. He gathered stones from the barren hills, carrying them one by one on his back under the blazing sun. His shoulders bled, his hands cracked, and still he worked, day after day, month after month. When the tower was nearly complete, Marpa came to inspect it. He looked at it for a long time, then said coldly, "You have built it on the wrong ground. Tear it down. Every stone must be carried back to where you found it." Milarepa's heart sank, but he obeyed. He dismantled the tower, returning every stone to its original place. Villagers mocked him, calling him the mad disciple of a cruel master. But Milarepa said nothing. He knew that somehow this suffering was purifying his karma. The second and third towers. When the first tower was gone, Marpa told him to build another, this time round in shape. Milarepa did as told, hauling rocks from dawn to dusk, eating little, sleeping less. His body weakened, but his devotion remained unshaken. When the second tower stood complete, Marpa inspected it again and said, Too far from my home. Tear it down and rebuild it closer. Once more, Milarepa obeyed. By the time Marpa ordered the third tower, Milarepa's back was covered in wounds. He was so exhausted he could barely stand, yet his faith kept him moving. Marpa's wife, Dadma, pitied him. She secretly tended to his injuries and begged Marpa to show mercy, but Marpa refused. Only when the seeds of his past deeds are burned through effort will his mind be ready for the teachings. The breaking point. After years of relentless labor, Milarepa's spirit finally cracked. He fell to the ground and wept, crying out, "I must have been born to suffer endlessly. My body is broken, and my mind has no peace. Perhaps I am not meant to find liberation." When he said this, Marpa struck him, not in anger, but with fierce compassion. "Good," Marpa said. "Now your pride is broken. Now your karma is ripening." At last, when the final tower stood complete, the same tower that still stands in Loktrek to this day, Marpa gazed at Milarepa with tears in his eyes. He revealed that all the hardship had been deliberate, a way to purify the karma of Milarepa's past killings. Only through that suffering could Milarepa's mind become clean enough to hold the ultimate teachings. The gift of the teachings. When Milarepa finally received the transmissions, the 6 yogas of Naropa and the Mahamudra teachings, it was said that his realization came swiftly and deeply. He had built more than a tower. He had built the foundation of enlightenment through his own flesh and bone. Part 5. The Inner Fire. How Milarepa Conquered the Mind. When Milarepa's body was nearly broken, Marpa finally declared that the time of his physical purification was complete. Now began the true path, the purification of the mind. Marpa initiated him into 2 of the most profound systems of Tibetan Buddhism, the 6 yogas of Naropa and the Mahamudra, teachings that had once passed from Indian masters to Marpa himself and from Marpa to Milarepa, forming the heart of the Kagyu lineage. The 6 yogas of Naropa. The 6 yogas of Naropa were advanced meditation techniques designed to transform body and mind into a single path to enlightenment. They were not ordinary practices. They require total dedication and the guidance of an accomplished master. The 6 are: 1. Tummo Inner Heat Yoga, generating inner fire through meditation, awakening the body's subtle energy. It allows the yogi to endure freezing mountains and symbolizes burning away ignorance. 2. Julu Illusory Body Yoga, realizing that all appearances, including one's own body, are like dreams, empty of solid existence. 3. Osel Clear Light Yoga, recognizing the pure, luminous nature of mind that shines when all thoughts dissolve. 4. Milam Dream Yoga, training the mind to remain aware and lucid during dreams, mastering the boundary between sleep and awakening. 5. Bardo Intermediate State Yoga, preparing for the state between death and rebirth, transforming fear into wisdom. 6. Phowa Consciousness Transference, learning to direct one's consciousness at the time of death toward liberation or a higher rebirth. These were not merely techniques, they were methods of transformation, turning every state of existence into a doorway to enlightenment. Mahamudra, the Great Seal. After receiving these yogas, Marpa gave Milarepa the highest of all teachings, Mahamudra, or the Great Seal. It is called the seal because it seals all experiences with the realization of truth. Mahamudra points directly to the nature of mind itself, that awareness is empty, luminous, and boundless, that thoughts and emotions are not enemies to be destroyed, but waves of the same vast ocean of consciousness. As Mapa told him, do not seek the Buddha outside. The nature of your own mind is the Buddha. The years of solitude. Armed with these teachings, Milarepa retreated to the wilderness. He lived alone in mountain caves, meditating through snowstorms and long winters, surviving on nettles until his skin turned green. He wrapped himself only in a thin cotton robe, his repa, because through the practice of tumo, his inner fire kept him warm even in the icy Himalayas. In those caves, he faced not external enemies, but the demons of his own mind: fear, doubt, hunger, loneliness. When visions of spirits appeared, he realized they were only projections of his own thoughts. When temptation and despair came, he neither rejected nor followed them. He simply observed, resting in pure awareness. In one of his songs of realization, he sang, "In solitude, I found my teacher, the echo of my own voice in the mountains." And this was the praise of the foe deemed vain. Thoughts arise and vanish like clouds, but the sky of mind remains clear and bright. The transformation years passed. The man who had once used magic to destroy now used meditation to liberate. His mind became vast and clear, his heart filled with compassion. He was no longer haunted by karma, he had understood it. Milarepa became a wandering yogi, teaching through spontaneous songs that flowed like rivers from the depth of realization. He gathered disciples not by authority, but by the purity of his presence. Among them were Rechenpa and Gampapa, who would carry the Kabyu lineage forward for centuries. Through him, Tibet received a living example of what Buddhism truly meant. Not dry philosophy, but the transformation of the entire being, from revenge to realization, from human suffering to awakened compassion. Part 6, Chapter 1, The Song of Impermanence. Milarepa was meditating in a mountain cave near Drin when a wealthy householder came seeking counsel. The man, burdened by fear of losing his possessions, bowed before the hermit and asked, "Repa, how may I keep what I have and still find peace?" Milarepa gazed into the valley below, where clouds rolled like waves across the earth. Smiling faintly, he began to sing the song of impermanence. All worldly pursuits have but one unavoidable end: sorrow. Acquisitions end in dispersion, buildings end in destruction, meetings end in separation, births end in death. Knowing this, one should from the first renounce attachment to all things of this world. The wise, therefore, will seek the unchanging truth, that which ever abides within, through renunciation of worldly aims, through meditation upon reality, through conquering of desire and pride, one may attain the changeless state of peace. The householder wept. The words were gentle, but sharper than a blade, cutting through illusion. He saw that all he clung to would one day vanish. Milarepa poured him a cup of melted snow and said, "When you know change, you fear nothing." More than 8 centuries later, this song still speaks to us. In a world obsessed with accumulation, Milarepa's melody reminds us that impermanence is not loss, it is liberation. The freedom we seek lies not in holding tighter, but in learning to let go. Part 6, Chapter 2, The Song of Solitude. It was early spring in the high mountains of Lapchi. Snow still covered the passes, but the first meltwater trickled down the rocks near Milarepa's cave. One morning, a band of hunters appeared, rough men with bows and long knives, chasing wild deer. When they saw the yogi seated cross-legged in his thin cotton robe, they laughed. "Old hermit," one called, "don't you feel the cold? Don't you miss the taste of meat or the warmth of a wife's bed?" Milarepa looked at them kindly. I have found a comfort you cannot steal, a feast that does not end. Then, with his voice low and resonant, he began to sing the song of solitude. This snowy mountain hermitage is a body of pure delight. In solitude there is happiness. In solitude there is freedom. In solitude the mind grows clear like still water. No worldly tasks to bind the limbs, no quarrels to darken the heart. Here I see the truth of the Dharma as plainly as the peaks before me. Here, though I eat but nettles and wear but rags, I feast upon contentment and am robed in peace. O wanderers of the world, you seek pleasure and find only pain. Come to the mountains. Here lies true joy. The sky is wide, the mind is wide, and in the heart that rests alone, the Buddhas dwell. When the song ended, silence spread wider than the mountains. The hunters lowered their weapons. The leader, moved beyond words, offered Milarepa a portion of his meat. The yogi smiled and declined. Feed it to the hungry below, he said. I am full. That night, the hunters slept without killing, and though they returned to the valleys at dawn, a piece of their restlessness stayed behind, in the echo of a song carried by wind. Today, when solitude feels like exile and stillness seems impossible, Milarepa's words remind us that peace is not the absence of people, but the absence of craving. The mountain he spoke of is not a place, it is a state of mind. Part 6, Chapter 3, The Song of Desire and Illusion. The wind howled across the cliffs of Dring, carrying the smell of pine resin and snow. Milarepa sat inside his cave, absorbed in meditation, when he heard cautious footsteps outside. A woman entered, a young widow from the nearby village. Her husband had died that winter, and her fields were failing. She had no children to support her, and fear had driven her up the mountain. She bowed, then spoke softly. Master, I have come because I am alone and frightened. If you descend to the village, I will care for you. You will have warm meals, a warm bed, and a companion. Please leave this harsh life. No one would judge you. Her voice trembled, and Milarepa knew her pain was real, but he also saw the subtle net of attachment tugging at her words. He lifted his gaze, gentle and unwavering. Sit, he said. I will tell you why I remain in solitude. And then he sang the song on illusion and desire. Listen, O woman of the plains, this life you cling to is like a dream at dawn. Its pleasures are but frost upon the grass. They melt when the sun of truth arises. The house you offer is a prison of desire. The food you cook is seasoned with attachment. The bed you name as comfort becomes a net that binds the wings of freedom. I, Milarepa, have seen through these illusions. I wander alone, not from hardness of heart, but because I have found the joy that does not fade. Wealth is a chain, beauty is a mist, companionship a shadow that lengthens and dissolves. Therefore, I cling not to the world, but to the Dharma which never betrays. The body shall crumble, the senses deceive, but the mind that knows its own nature is the sky that no storm can darken. If you seek freedom, look within. If you seek peace, abandon grasping. The path is hard, yet its reward is sure, the radiant bliss that no desire can equal. When the song faded, the woman wiped her eyes. She had come hoping to pull Milarepa back into the world, but instead, his words loosened her own suffering. I, I understand, she murmured. Not entirely, but enough. Milarepa offered her dried nettles to carry home, a gesture of simple compassion. She bowed deeply. As she walked down the mountain path, something inside her felt lighter, as if she had set down a heavy bundle she didn't know she'd been carrying. That night, Milarepa returned to meditation, knowing that another heart had taken its first small step toward freedom. Part 6, Chapter 3, Revised Opening. Milarepa's influence after his first 10 years in solitude. When Milarepa left Marpa and began his life of retreat among the Himalayan caves, he carried nothing with him, no scriptures, no disciples, no reputation, not even a robe fit for the cold. And yet, within the first 10 years, something extraordinary happened. People across the Sangin Lato regions began to hear rumors of a white-clad hermit, a man who survived on nettles, meditated through blizzards, and was said to glow faintly in the moonlight. At first these were simple village whispers, a hunter glimpsing a figure sitting unmoving on a cliff, a shepherd boy hearing chanting from a cave where no footprints led. But slowly the stories grew stranger and more consistent. Some said Milarepa could still the wind by simply exhaling. Others claimed he healed fevers with a touch. And most astonishingly, wandering monks reported that when Milarepa taught, even those who understood no scripture felt something shift within them. A clarity, a quieting, a loosening of their grasp on suffering. Soon, pilgrims began climbing the mountains to seek him. They came bruised by grief, tangled in worldly fears, or desperate for meaning. Many returned with renewed faith, saying, "This yogi teaches the Dharma not with words alone, but with the force of how he lives." His fame was not the fame of a miracle worker. It was the reputation of a man who embodied Buddhism so completely that people saw enlightenment as something attainable, not distant, not mythical, but living in flesh and bone. And this mattered profoundly for Tibetan Buddhism. At the time, Buddhism in Tibet was still reorganizing after periods of political fragmentation. Teachings were scattered, monasteries were rising but unevenly supported, and village folk still blended Buddhism with older folk practices. Many felt that enlightenment was something only monks or scholars could approach. Milarepa shattered that assumption. Here was a man with no monastic rank, no wealth, and a criminal past, yet through sheer practice and devotion, he attained realization. His life became a message: if even a sinner can awaken, then so can anyone. That is why, within a decade, Milarepa's name traveled farther than he ever did. He strengthened faith without building monasteries. He spread Dharma without ever intending to teach. He became living proof that Buddhism was not only a religion, it was a path. Part 7, The Realms of Existence and Those He Met. The six realms explained in Tibetan Buddhism. The world we see is only a thin layer of a much larger structure. Sentient beings move through six realms of existence, shaped by karma, delusion, attachment, and wisdom. These realms are not separate physical worlds, nor are they merely symbols. They are psychological landscapes and metaphysical states, experienced inwardly and outwardly in life and beyond it. 1. The God realm Deva, blissful, radiant, long-lived beings. Their danger is complacency. When karma runs out, their fall is devastating. 2. The demigod realm Asura, jealous, powerful beings who live in constant rivalry. Their minds burn with competition, aggression, and envy. 3. The human realm, the realm of balance. Suffering exists, but so does self-awareness. This is the realm where awakening is easiest. 4. The animal realm, beings bound by instinct, fear, and ignorance. Their suffering comes from vulnerability and lack of understanding. 5. The hungry ghost realm, Preta, beings with enormous stomachs and thin necks, tormented by insatiable desire. They symbolize addiction, craving, and emptiness. 6. The hell realms, realms of intense suffering, both hot and cold, generated by hatred, anger, and cruelty. Milarepa, after years of meditation, came to see these realms not as distant mythic territories, but as real places of experience inhabited by real beings, just as real as the villagers who climbed the mountain to visit him. And sometimes those beings came to him. Encounters with the realms 1. The hungry ghosts. Late one autumn night, when the wind scraped the forest like a whispering hand, Milarepa stepped outside his cave to stretch. As he looked across the rocky slope, he saw flickers of pale movement, emaciated figures drifting like smoke. Their eyes were wide, hollow, desperate. They circled him, trembling. "Master," they cried, "we are tormented day and night by hunger. Pray, give us something to eat." Milarepa saw that food would do nothing. Their craving was beyond physical. So he sat, composed himself, and sang a teaching on emptiness and desire. As the song rose into the air, the ghosts quieted. Some dissolved into light, others bowed and vanished, and some, he knew, would return, still learning. 2. The spirits of the mountains, local gods, and asuras. In the remote peaks of Lapchi, Milarepa often met fierce mountain spirits, half-gods who guarded valleys, rivers, and passes. Many of them, threatened by his presence, tried to frighten him with storms and hallucinations. But when they saw he could not be shaken, they bowed. "You do not come to conquer," the spirit said. "You come to liberate." In several teachings, Milarepa explained that even powerful spirits are trapped by pride and jealousy, just like the Asuras of legend. By surrendering hostility, they became protectors of the Dharma. 3. The Hell Beings. During a winter retreat, Milarepa entered a deep meditation on compassion. Suddenly the cave dissolved around him, and he found himself surrounded by beings writhing in fiery torment. Their bodies burned and reformed endlessly, driven by hatred and regret. One cried, "Why does this torment not end?" Milarepa wept, not from fear, but from compassion that arose spontaneously, overwhelming and pure. In that moment, he realized, hell is the mind consumed by anger. As he radiated compassion, one being vanished, freed, even if only for a moment, and the vision dissolved. 4. Heavenly visitors. On rare occasions, beings of light appeared, gentle, luminous, serene. They carried offerings of flowers or radiant bowls of nectar. They praised his practice and reminded him that even gods fall from their realms when their karma is exhausted. Milarepa treated these visitors with the same humility he showed to hungry ghosts. He once said, "Even a god envies liberation." Where these encounters matter, Milarepa's experiences with the six realms were not meant to be supernatural spectacles. They were lessons. Desire creates the hungry ghost realm. Jealousy creates the demigod realm. Anger creates the hell realms. Ignorance creates the animal realm. Pride creates the god realm. Part 8. Teachings to Demons and Spirits. Milarepa spent much of his life in the loneliest corners of Tibet, places villagers avoided, places where winds carried old fears, where mountain spirits, ghosts, and demons were believed to wander freely. But to Milarepa, these beings were not monsters. They were minds in pain. Where others saw danger, he saw students. The cave of Red Rock, the demon that tested him. One night, deep in the Red Rock cave above Nyang, Milarepa was meditating when a dark, clawed form appeared at the entrance. Its body flickered like smoke. Its eyes gleamed with cruelty. Milarepa felt the sharp sting of the demon's presence, a raw energy of hatred and fear. Instead of resisting, he softened. "You've come," he said quietly. "Sit." The demon recoiled. No human had ever invited to sit calmly. Milarepa did not chant, did not threaten, did not attempt to banish it. He simply remained in meditation, unshaken. Slowly, the demon shrank, losing its monstrous shape. Its chest tightened like a child about to cry. Finally it asked, "What are you? I cannot frighten you." Milarepa replied, "I am the one who sees fear clearly. It dissolves when seen." It became a guardian spirit and vowed never to harm beings again. The host of spirits in Lapchi. In the high valleys of Lapchi, a place sacred to hermits, Milarepa often sat near cliff edges where the wind roared like living creatures. One morning, a procession of spirits appeared, mountain guardians, river deities, mischievous earth spirits, wind demons with skeletal faces. They circled his cave, pacing restlessly. Their leader, a fierce mountain god with a body of swirling mist, stepped forward. "We cannot allow you to stay," he thundered. "Your practice disturbs the old balance. Leave this place." Milarepa opened his eyes. No fear, only compassion. "If my presence causes discomfort," he said, "then learn from it. The disturbance you feel is your own clinging." The mountain god grew furious, sending a storm of ice and debris, but Milarepa sang a song of emptiness and fearlessness. The storm collapsed into silence. The spirit's shapes wavered and calmed. Then something unexpected happened. The spirits began offering flowers. They transformed from threats into protectors of the Dharma, and some followed Milarepa invisibly for years, guarding retreating monks in his name. The demoness of the dark valley. During one harsh winter, Milarepa traveled through a valley rumored to be cursed. Past pilgrims avoided it after dark, fearing the demoness said to devour the unwary. Milarepa walked straight in. As he entered a grove of dead trees, a towering female figure emerged, tusks, wild hair, and fire flashing from her eyes. She blocked the path. "No one crosses without feeding me," she screamed. Milarepa bowed politely. "I have no flesh to offer you, only teachings." The demoness lunged, but froze an arm's length away. His presence was like an open sky she could not penetrate. He taught her the nature of grasping, the root of hunger and anger. Her monstrous form crumbled. She became a pitiable figure, thin and trembling. "Free me," she whispered. Milarepa recited a mantra of compassion. The demoness's body dissolved into pale smoke that rose upward like incense. A suffering spirit was released. Why Milarepa taught demons? To Milarepa, demons were not external enemies. They were manifestations of the mind's poisons: fear, anger, jealousy, confusion, desire, pride. Meeting these spirits was not unusual for yogis of his depth. Through meditation, they saw not only human psychology, but the subtle realms intertwined with it. Milarepa did not conquer demons. He converted them. He taught them. He liberated them. And through this, he showed all future practitioners a profound truth. Nothing is beyond compassion. Nothing is beyond transformation. Even demons can become disciples. Part 9. The timeline of his transformation from student to solitary yogi, age 38-40. After completing the final instructions from Mapa and receiving the 6 yogas of Naropa and Mahamudra, Milarepa left his teacher and entered the mountains alone. At this time he was around late 30s, thin, determined, and carrying only what Mapa gave him: meditation methods, mantras, unwavering faith. He had no students, no shelter, and no reputation. His only goal was to purify the heavy karma of his past and attain realization. Years 1, 3. Isolation, the period of fierce practice. These first years were the most extreme of his life. Milarepa wandered the caves of Drin, the slopes of Lapchi, the desolate ridges of Lapchi, and Mount Kailash, barren places where no villagers lived, cliffs where winds tore like knives. His food came from nettles and snowmelt. His clothes were rags. His body grew green from eating nothing but wild leaves. It was in these early years that the first encounters with demons and spirits occurred. Not because he sought them, but because powerful meditation stripped away the boundaries between subtle worlds. He burned away anger, fear, and hesitation, often facing literal storm spirits or terrifying apparitions that tried to drive him out. By meeting them with compassion, he transformed them, and in doing so, transformed himself. This is when stories began spreading through the remote villages. Up in the mountains is a man who sings to demons. Years 4, 7. Mastery of the inner yogas. Once his mind stabilized and visions became opportunities rather than threats, Milarepa entered the deepest phase of yogic mastery. Tumo inner heat sustained him in the high glaciers. Illusory form helped him recognize demons as projections of mind. Dream yoga allowed him to continue practice even in sleep. Clear light revealed the nature of mind directly. 4. And Bardo practices deepened his compassion for beings in all realms. It was during this period that he famously said, "I fear not demons, for they are but the shadows of mind." The spirits he once repelled now began to protect him. Mountain gods offered shelter. Local spirits brought villagers dreams, urging them to seek his teachings. This was the turning point. Milarepa did not try to become a teacher. He became one simply by being who he was. Years 7, 10. The rise of his reputation. By now, tales of Milarepa's compassion, fearlessness, and strange events around his caves had traveled far beyond the valleys. Hunters spoke of a glowing hermit. Shepherds claimed he stopped storms with a song. Women said he cured illness with a touch. Monks whispered that he embodied the Dharma more purely than scholars. People began climbing the mountains to find him. Grieving widows, desperate farmers, wandering monks, bandits seeking redemption, spirits and demons seeking release. He still lived simply, make it to the cold, eating nettles, meditating for days without moving. Yet his presence radiated a warmth and clarity that shook people awake. This is the period when he converted the demoness, befriended mountain spirits, and turned hostile forces into protectors of the Dharma. The more he helped beings, the more beings came. Year 10 and after, the first disciples arrive. By now, Milarepa was in his late 40s. His body was lean and tough from years in the mountains, his hair long, his skin darkened by wind. His realization was steady and profound. The first disciple to truly remain with him was Rechongpa, a wild, passionate young yogi who sought magical powers and deep tantric teachings. Soon after came Gampopa, the monk physician who would inherit Milarepa's lineage and spread it across Tibet. These disciples had heard many stories: the hermit who spoke to ghosts, the yogi whose psalms shook the mind, the man who turned demons into Dharma guardians, the only master who could guide those seeking true awakening. When they finally met him, they saw not a miracle worker, but a simple man in white rags, smiling gently, sitting before a pile of nettles. And that is how Milarepa's life changed, from murderer in atonement to solitary mountain yogi, to conqueror of inner demons, to teacher of beings of all realms, to the founder of a lineage. Part 10. Rechenpa, the Wild Disciple. How Rechenpa first heard of Milarepa. Rechen Dorje Drakpa, later known as Rechenpa, was born with a sharp mind and an even sharper ambition. As a young man, he traveled with wandering yogis, learned rituals from tantric adepts, and studied medicine with hermits who lived among the high stones. But something in him remained restless. Where others sought peace, Rechenpa sought power. He wanted the deepest teachings, the ones whispered to be dangerous, the ones rumored to grant mastery over body and mind. Every teacher he met disappointed him. Some were too afraid to teach him. Others lacked the realization to give him what he wanted. But one night, in a lonely mountain inn, he overheard two traveling monks speaking in hushed, reverent tones. One lives in the high cliffs of Drin, one monk whispered. A man who eats only nettles and sings to demons, said the other. His songs bring rain when needed and stop storms when begged. They say he fears nothing because he has conquered the mind. Rechonta leaned closer. Who is he? The monks exchanged a glance. Milarepa. The name struck Rechenpa like a bell. Something fierce inside him awakened. This, he felt, was the teacher he had been searching for. Rechenpa's journey to find Milarepa. Finding Milarepa was no simple task. Rechenpa traveled through valleys, crossed glaciers, and slept on bare rock. Villagers directed him only vaguely. Up there, beyond the ridge, where the winds scream, in a cave shaped like an eagle's wing, you will know you're close when the birds grow quiet. Finally, after weeks of climbing, he reached a desolate cliff face where the world felt unnaturally still. At the far end of the ledge sat a thin man in white rags, motionless as a statue, surrounded by nothing but nettles. His hair was wild and black, his skin shone faintly, almost luminous. His eyes were bright like a clear mountain lake. Rechongpa had expected a fierce sorcerer. Instead, he found a man whose presence itself was the teaching. He bowed deeply. Master, I have crossed mountains to find you. Teach me the profound practices. Teach me the dangerous methods. Teach me everything you know. Milarepa smiled gently. I will teach you, he said, but first you must tame your mind. My Richumpa was difficult. Richumpa was brilliant, passionate, and fearless, but proud. Like a wildfire, he burned brightly and dangerously. He often demanded higher teachings before he was ready. At times, he challenged Milarepa's instructions. Sometimes he even stormed out of the cave, furious, vowing to find a better master. And every time, after days or weeks of frustration, he returned, humbled, exhausted, ready to try again. Milarepa loved him deeply, but guided him with firm compassion. He saw in Rechenpa the potential to carry the lineage's blazing tantric energy, but only if the young yogi's ego was softened. So Milarepa gave him tasks, meditating in terrifying caves, fasting in icy valleys, confronting spirits, traveling to receive teachings from other yogis. Slowly, painfully, Rechenpa transformed. How Rechenpa helped start the lineage, while Gampopa would later build monasteries and organize the teachings into a system. Rechenpa carried the raw, yogic essence of Milarepa's path, the songs, the visions, the unsystematized practices transmitted from Marpa to Milarepa. Preserved Milarepa's songs and oral instructions, carried secret tantric teachings to students, Mazay and others, traveled through Tibet, teaching the yogic path of direct realization, kept the wandering yogi tradition alive, ensured the lineage was not only monastic, but also wild, experiential, and free. Where Gampopa brought structure, Richimpa brought fire. His students became the Rechung Kagyu, a branch rooted directly in Milarepa's yogic transmissions. Milarepa once said, Rechungpa is like the moon, bright, reflective, but needing the open sky. He will carry forth a yogi's lineage. And he did. Why Rechungpa matters. Without Rechungpa, Milarepa's personal songs and yogic instructions might have been lost. The wandering yogi tradition of the Kagi school would have faded. The teachings would have become purely monastic. The fierce, experiential path to realization would have weakened. Rechingpa ensured that Milarepa's legacy remained alive, not frozen in texts. He was difficult, but perfect for his role. Part 11. The Arrival of Gampapa, the monk who met the yogi. Before the stories of disputes, destinies, and the branching of the Kagyu lineage, there was the quiet, fateful arrival of the man who would eventually stand alongside Richampa as Milarepa's heart disciple, Gampapa. If Richampa entered Milarepa's life like fire, brilliant, unpredictable, and consuming, then Gampopa entered like water, steady, disciplined, and shaped by deep sorrow. 1. A life shattered before it truly began. Gampopa, born Sonam Rinchen in the soft green valleys of Nial, was trained as a physician from youth. He was compassionate, gifted with calm intelligence, and beloved by his village. He married young and lived a peaceful life, healing the sick and caring for the poor. But peace rarely lasts. A plague swept through the region, claiming many lives, including that of his beloved wife, whose death would transform him forever. As she lay dying, she whispered, "Seek the Dharma, become a monk, find the master who will show you the path beyond suffering." Her final words became his vows. After cremating her body, he renounced his home, possessions, and medical practice. He entered monastic life with the depths of commitment only a broken heart can produce. 2. The monk seeking the yogi. Within the monastery, Gampopa excelled. He absorbed the Kadampa teachings with astonishing clarity, ethics, mind training, and the contemplative practices of Atisha. His teachers praised him for his discipline and compassion, yet he felt something unresolved. Some nights he dreamed of a wild yogi wearing only a thin cotton cloth. Other nights he heard a voice calling from the mountains, "Come north to the one who sings the Dharma." One afternoon, a wandering hermit arrived at the monastery. Over a simple meal of barley soup, he spoke of a strange ascetic called Milarepa, a man who lives in icy caves. The hermit said, who glows in the moonlight, who sings the Dharma as easily as breathing. Gampopa felt a sudden, overwhelming certainty. This is the master my wife spoke of. This is the one I must find. That very night, he left the monastery. 3. The long road toward destiny. Gampopa's journey toward Milarepa was filled with hardship. He walked through blizzards, crossed frozen rivers, and passed through forests haunted by wolves. In every village, he asked, "Where is the yogi Milarepa?" Most villagers had heard only rumors. Some pointed toward distant mountains. "He moved that way last winter." Others said, "He comes and goes like a dream. But if your heart is sincere, you'll find him." Starving, exhausted, and close to despair, Gampopa finally reached a valley scented with wild herbs. There, sitting calmly outside a cave, wrapped in a thin cotton cloth, was a man whose presence radiated warmth despite the cold. It was Milarepa. 4. Their first meeting, water meets fire. Milarepa looked at the weary monk and said, "Ah, Sonan Rinchen of Nial, your faith has carried you here. Your suffering has made your heart clear." Gampopa fell to his knees and wept. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt a genuine path opening before him. Milarepa saw immediately that Gampopa's mind was already stabilized through discipline, sharpened by loss, and softened by compassion. Milarepa later taught, "He came like the full moon rising, already luminous, meeting only the clear sky." 5. How Gampopa differed from Richampa. Where Richampa was fiery, ambitious, and easily wounded by pride, Gampopa was calm, humble, and softened by sorrow. Richampa sought hidden tantric teachings. Gampopa sought understanding and stability. Richampa fought with ego. Gampopa fought with impermanence. Milarepa loved them both, but immediately recognized that their destinies would be very different. He once told Richampa, "Yeah, you are lightning. He is the mountain the lightning touches." With Gampopa's arrival, the Kagyu lineage began to take its enduring shape. One branch grounded in monastic discipline, one carried through wandering yogis, both essential, both born of Milarepa's wisdom. Part 12. The Training of Gampopa and the Quiet Conflict. Gampopa's arrival in Milarepa's world was like a calm breeze entering a stone-worn valley, where Rechampa brought fire, intensity, and youthful restlessness. Gampopa brought an almost unsettling stillness, an inner quiet carved by both tragedy and formal monastic discipline. His training under Milarepa would become one of the most transformative periods in the entire Kagyu lineage. But it was not without tension. Two worlds met, the raw yogic wilderness of Milarepa and the structured, scholarly, medical, monastic mind of Gampopa. After renouncing the world, following the death of his wife and child, Gampopa wandered in search of the deepest Dharma he could find. He learned of Milarepa through whispers among solitary hermits, a saint in tattered cotton, glowing with the heat of meditation, capable of bending demons and bandits alike through compassion. The rumors spoke of miracles, but more importantly, of liberation in one lifetime. When Gampopa finally found Milarepa's cave, he approached with reverence and humility. Milarepa knew instantly, through the clarity of his own realization, that this monk would one day carry forward the lineage in a structured form far beyond the cave's darkness. At first, Gampopa's training focused on unlearning. Milarepa challenged his reliance on scriptural knowledge. He questioned his attachment to monastic purity. He pierced through the subtle pride that comes from righteousness. Gampopa, though gentle, struggled. How can one practice without rules? He once asked. Milarepa laughed softly. Rules are the boat. Realization is the shore. Don't carry the boat after you arrive. Despite the challenges, Gampopa's sincerity was immovable. He went through the same harsh tests Milarepa was known for. Grueling meditation, emotional scrutiny, nights in icy caves, complete surrender of identity, and slowly, the monk's disciplined clarity merged with the yogi's raw openness. Gampopa blossomed. The conflict between them was subtle, not loud like Rechampa's, but rooted in worldview. Gampopa's monastic background urged him to bring structure, community, and accessible teachings. Milarepa's way was solitary, wild, and uncompromising. One evening, Gampopa expressed his dream of building monasteries and guiding many students in an organized setting. Milarepa gazed into the distance and replied, "You will build what I cannot. But remember, a monastery grows like a tree. Its roots must be in emptiness, or the branches will choke the sky." The conflict, though gentle, ran deep. Gampopa worried structure might dilute the essence. Milarepa worried structure might be mistaken for essence. Yet Milarepa knew the age demanded both paths. If the lineage relied only on caves, few would reach it. If it relied only on monasteries, few would realize it. They reconciled without a fight, their disagreement becoming a complementary truth. Milarepa eventually gave Gampopa the full transmission, declaring, "You are the physician of beings. Go where I cannot. Burn my words into a living tradition." And Gampopa bowed, tears wetting the cave floor, knowing the moment marked not just the end of his training, but the beginning of a new era. Part 13. The Final Path of the Cotton-Clad Yogi. Milarepa's later life unfolded like the slow settling of snow over the high plains. Quiet, luminous, yet carrying the weight of a world he had transformed. By the time Richumpa and Gampopa came under his guidance, the winds of Tibet already carried his name from valley to valley. Farmers uttered it like a prayer. Hunters whispered it uneasily as they followed animal tracks. Hermits spoke it as one speaks of a star that appears once in an age. And still he wandered, barefoot, wrapped only in a thin cotton robe, moving through the vast loneliness of the mountains, as though the peaks themselves were his disciples. Rechumpa's years 11 and 5 to 11 and 10 at Lachi, Dream, and the Yolmo valleys. Rechumpa's training took place in regions where the wind howls like a living creature. The cliffs of Lachi were black with ancient stone. Drin lay carved like a forgotten scar in the earth. Here, in caves no larger than a monk's cell, the young yogi lived beside Milarepa, if living can be applied to the austere, flame-forging discipline of those days. To rise with Milarepa was to awaken in a world where time had already dissolved. Long before dawn, Rechungpa would open his eyes to find his master seated in meditation, perfectly still, as though carved from mountain light. Sometimes it seemed Milarepa had not slept at all. Other times, it felt as if he had been awake for centuries. Days unfolded without ceremony. In the mornings, Milarepa often greeted the wind with a spontaneous song, each verse striking Rechenpa's heart with the precision of an arrow. At midday, they would descend into the valleys, where villagers awaited them like seedlings reaching for sunlight. By afternoon, they returned to their caves, where silence pressed against the walls like a second skin. At night, Rechenpa practiced the fierce heat of Tumo, while Milarepa watched with eyes that saw through flesh to the very movement of karma. Living with Milarepa was not peaceful, it was transformative, relentless, surgical. Rechampa once confessed that being near him was like warming oneself at a fire that burns away the self. Did he reach enlightenment? Rechampa attained great yogic mastery, and countless accounts call him a Mahasiddha. Yet the spark of pride never fully left him, and for that reason, tradition says he did not reach complete Buddhahood in that life. But his lineage, the Rechamkagyu, remains one of the purest streams of Milarepa's heart teachings. Gampopa's training between the years 11 and 10 and 1117 at Shuwar and the snowy valleys of Tangampapa arrived like a quiet flame, controlled, steady, already polished by years of monastic discipline. Where Richimpa was fire, Gampa was water. His training took place in the high valleys of Tan, especially around Chuwa, where the hills softened into rolling snow. Life with Milarepa for Gampa was gentler, though no less profound. He woke before dawn to prepare his master's tea, tending the cave with the devotion of a son. Milarepa taught him neither through wrath nor through miracle, but with a tenderness that surprised even himself. You are like the moon, he once said. You shine by reflecting the sun. Milarepa transmitted the deepest Mahamudra instructions, those few teachings that render books unnecessary and dissolve doubt in a single breath. Dampopa meditated long into the evenings, letting each verse settle into the marrow of his being. Did Gampopa reach enlightenment? Yes. Both tradition and lineage history speak of Gampopa attaining full realization, his mind becoming as vast and unbounded as the sky above them. From him sprang the monastic Kagyu schools, which later shaped the religious landscape of Tibet. The last cycle of wanderings, in the years between 1117 and 1123, during these years, Milarepa traveled less and taught more. His fame, unwanted yet unavoidable, had grown like a mountain shadow, long and unshakable. He wandered from hamlet to hamlet, singing songs that could calm a murderer or melt a miser's heart. Spirits, once hostile, bowed before him. Hunters laid down their bows. Jealous scholars challenged him and left humbled, unable to outmatch the clarity of a man who owned nothing, feared nothing, and clung to nothing. Sometimes he would gaze across a valley for hours, and disciples understood he was preparing to leave. The poisoning and passing in 1123, Chua, the man called Sapua, had carried bitterness in his heart for years. When he approached Milarepa with poisoned yogurt, the yogi smiled, seeing through the plot as clearly as the midday sun. Let it be so, Milarepa said, accepting the offering. This body has served its purpose. When the poison settled in his veins, he gathered his disciples. Rechonkwa was away in India, and this too seemed part of the mysterious unfolding of karma. Gampopa knelt at his side, tears soaking the earth. Milarepa's final words were not dramatic. They were simple. Do not cling to me. Do not cling to this body. Look to your own mind. There you will find me. When he entered meditation, witnesses reported fragrances on the wind and lights rising like petals from the valley floor. Thus ended the life of Tibet's greatest yogi. Part 14. The disciples who carried the flame. Rechenpa was far from Tibet when the winds carried Milarepa's final breath into the world. He was in India, retrieving teachings, fulfilling the prophecy his master had whispered to him years earlier. He dreamed often of Milarepa on that journey, the narrow eyes, the sharp laugh, the way he could turn a cave into a palace simply by sitting in it. But the dream he had on the night Milarepa passed was different. He saw a vast sky without a sun, and a robe of cotton drifting down like a feather. When he woke, he knew the return to Chua. It was late summer of 1123 when Rechupa finally crossed the mountain passes back into Tibet. The air was thin and sharp, the rivers were swollen with melting snow. As he approached Chua, villagers stepped aside, lowering their heads, not in reverence for him, but in sorrow. No one needed to speak. The silence itself was a message. Richumpa entered Milarepa's old cave. The air smelled faintly of juniper and something softer, something like the last warmth of a fire that has recently gone out. He fell to his knees. There were no relics left. Milarepa had instructed his disciples not to cling to the body. Only the meditation seat remained, a faint impression in the rock. Richunpa placed his forehead there, trembling. No song rose in his chest that day. For the first time in his life, Rechampa had no words. Grief came to him like a monsoon. He raged, blamed himself, blamed the world, blamed the jealousy of Sakpua. But beneath the stone lay something far more difficult, regret. Regret for every argument, for every time he had stormed away, for every moment he had doubted his master's intention. He stayed in the cave for days without speaking or eating, wrapped not in a cotton robe, but in a robe of memory. Only when a young nomad boy came to offer him water did Rechangpa rise again. The boy said, "If you are a disciple of Jetsun, then you must sing." Rechangpa looked at the child, astonished. Milarepa's compassion had always found the perfect messenger. That night, he sang again, a raw, broken song, like stone cracking in frost, a song of grief that turned slowly, verse by verse, into realization. The yogic lineage begins. Richompa finally left Chua and wandered once more through the ravines and solitude that had shaped him. His teaching was wild, fiery, unpredictable, like Milarepa, without the softness, like a blade still being sharpened back by light, like by waves, like rage, like Milarepa without infallible. He founded the Richung Kagyu, a lineage of yogis who valued solitude over monastery, direct experience over scripture, and realization over ceremony. Richumpa never replaced Milarepa, but he carried his song, sometimes harsh, sometimes radiant, always deeply human. And wherever he traveled, he ended each teaching with the same reminder: my master has not died, he has only hidden himself in the nature of your mind. Part 15. The Seed of a School. When the rites for Milarepa were complete and the disciples dispersed into their regions, Gampopa remained on the mountain for several quiet weeks. He walked the same narrow path Milarepa had walked. He meditated in the cave until the walls felt warm with memory. He listened to the wind rustling over the stones, trying to hear his teacher's voice inside it sighing. But the instruction Milarepa had given him, heal the world with Dharma, kept returning like an echo he could not ignore. So eventually he rose, took only his bowl and shawl, and descended from the high valleys of Lachi. The world below felt startlingly open. Villages moved with the rhythm of ordinary life. Monks chanted in their temples. Farmers called to their yaks. Gampopa carried Milarepa's heart teachings like a secret flame beneath his robe. He walked south until he reached the green falls of Dogpo. a region far different from Milarepa's harsh cliffs, gentler mountains, spacious valleys, and a calmness that felt made for teaching. There he settled, quietly at first, in a small hermitage above the river. The first students. It began slowly. A few herders noticed the wandering monk with the serene gaze. A local lama heard of a mountain ascetic who spoke with remarkable clarity. One by one, seekers arrived, drawn not by miracles, but by the balance Gampopa embodied, the warmth of the healer, and the unwavering discipline of the yogi. Unlike Milarepa's wild, solitary method, Gampopa taught in structured layers, foundational ethics, mind training, calming, and insight meditation, the Mahamudra view he had learned from his master. His students said his words were like water poured into a clear bowl, simple, transparent, and nourishing. Soon, his hermitage could no longer contain the gatherings. He accepted this change without pride or resistance. He had always known Milarepa's teachings were not meant to vanish into one cave, but to spread like seeds on the wind. The first monastic community, as more students arrived, farmers, monks, scholars, and yogins alike, Gampopa made a quiet but revolutionary choice. He established a disciplined monastic order grounded in Milarepa's experiential wisdom. This was unheard of. Milarepa had lived as a solitary yogi in threadbare cotton rags. Gampopa wove that same essence into the structure of daily monastic life. Morning meditation infused with Mahamudra, strict ethical vows combined with direct realization practices. Group debate alongside solitary retreat. The union of Kadampa, clarity, and Milarepa's raw, blazing insight. People began calling him Dagpo Lahe, the physician of Dagpo, because he healed ignorance as naturally as he once healed diseases. The blossoming of lineages. From his growing community emerged brilliant disciples, some gentle, some fierce, each reflecting a different facet of Milarepa's lineage. They carried Gampopa's synthesis to distant valleys, founding schools that would one day be known as Karma Kagyu, Drikum, Kagyu, Taklung, Kagyu, Takung. None of this happened quickly. It grew like a tree, steadily, silently, rooted deeply in Milarepa's instructions, but shaped by Gampopa's own clarity. The legacy of Dagpa. People later said that Milarepa gave the Kagyu lineage its heart, pure, fierce, radiant. But it was Gampopa who gave the lineage its body, a structure strong enough to endure centuries. In the quiet monastery he built among the soft Dagpo hills, the songs of the mountain yogi were transformed into a tradition that could guide both hermits and monks, princes and villagers, wanderers and scholars. Milarepa had taught with thunder, Gampopa taught with rivers, and the school that grew from him carried both, the thunder above and the river below, into the future.